It began like any other oversight hearing, until Jasmine Crockett leaned into her mic. No warm-up, no winding path to get there, just a sentence too sharp, too deliberate, to be anything but intentional. She claimed Donald Trump had a secret child, not as a rumor, not as speculation, but as a statement delivered with the cadence of sworn testimony. The chamber froze. The clock seemed to hesitate, and in the next 54 seconds, the entire balance of that hearing, and maybe more, shifted. Like and subscribe if you believe some truths can't be kept off the record. Some hearings start calm. This one was already a bruise waiting to split. From the moment the gavel struck wood, the energy was wrong. The kind of wrong that isn't loud at first. It's the wrong that hums under the skin, waiting for the first spark to set it off. The chair had barely welcomed the members before two procedural disputes derailed the tone. First, a clash over whether certain subpoenaed emails had been fully turned over. Second, a fight over the accuracy of a witness's timeline, the kind of point that, in another hearing, might have been settled with a single clarification. But today, every word was a trigger. Both sides had walked in primed for confrontation. Questions weren't being asked to gather information. They were being fired like flares, meant to light up the flaws in the other side's case. By the third witness, the air in the chamber felt tighter. Not because of heat, the HVAC was working just fine, but because nobody was leaning back in their chairs. Every member was pitched forward, eyes fixed, hands ready over their microphones like gunfighters. Trump's name wasn't even on the official agenda. The topics were budget oversight, contract allocations, and procedural compliance. But his shadow hung over the hearing anyway. In side comments, in the occasional raised eyebrow whenever a policy was traced back to his administration. Crockett had been uncharacteristically quiet that morning. No sharp interjections, no pointed facial reactions. She sat still, hands folded, her notepad closed in front of her. It was a tell, but not the one people thought, because Crockett wasn't tuning out. She was loading. The folder next to her elbow had been there since she walked in, slim, manila, unmarked. At least two members on the other side had glanced at it more than once, as if trying to read its weight by sight alone. At exactly 1:14 p.m., the chair called her name. Crockett uncapped her pen, but didn't write. She adjusted her microphone, tilted it slightly toward her, and leaned in with the steady, deliberate posture of someone about to change the temperature in the room. It wasn't the volume, it was the precision. Crockett didn't clear her throat. She didn't shuffle papers. She just began, as if the sentence had been sitting on the tip of her tongue for months, and today was simply the day it decided to arrive. Mr. Chairman, before I proceed with my prepared questions, there is a matter directly relevant to the credibility of the former president's sworn testimony and the disclosures submitted to this committee. It was formal language, but even formality can carry the sound of a blade unsheathing. One member on the minority side leaned back, crossing his arms, not casual but defensive. The stenographer's pen slowed, the ballpoint gliding just enough to keep pace. Crockett kept her tone level, letting the silence around her words stretch into the kind of attention no gavel can command. It concerns an undisclosed child that Donald Trump has never acknowledged publicly or in any legal filing made to this body. If she had shouted it, it would have been easier to dismiss. A partisan outburst, a headline-hunting jab. But this wasn't shouted. It was placed, like a note slid under a locked door. From the witness table, a stiffening. From the chair, a fractional tightening of the jaw. From the press gallery, a shift. Camera operators leaning in half an inch, as if closing that distance would somehow make the words sharper. Crockett's gaze didn't sweep the room. She kept her eyes on the chair. Because this wasn't about the reaction. It was about forcing the record to absorb the line whole. I have in my possession notarized statements from a credible witness, as well as documentation that raises serious questions about financial omissions related to this matter. No flourish. No, I yield my time to wrap it with a bow. Just the sentence, its edges bare. 54 seconds from first word to last. Enough time for an agenda to collapse. Enough time for the floor to change under everyone's feet. Some hearings recover from detours. This one didn't even try. When Crockett's last word fell into the room, there was no instant uproar, no overlapping voices, Just that strange hanging quiet that comes when people are deciding whether to breathe or wait. The chair's eyes dropped to his notes. He wasn't reading them. He was hiding behind them. The longer he looked down, the more it seemed like acknowledgement. On the majority side, two members angled their chairs toward each other, lips moving in low, clipped syllables. One tapped the table twice, a nervous tell he probably didn't realize was on camera. The witness at the table, mid-answer before this detonation, sat perfectly still. One hand hovered over the water glass, as if unsure whether moving would draw more attention or somehow protect him from it. In the press gallery, notebooks froze mid-sentence. Photographers adjusted focus, sensing this was not a point to waste on wide shots. A single cough from the back row sounded louder than it should have. Every planned question after this moment suddenly felt like set dressing. The rest of the morning's agenda was a neat pile of cards tossed into a sudden wind. Procedurally, the chair should have steered it back. Morally, politically, no one wanted to touch it. Not yet. Crockett didn't push. She didn't follow with supporting detail. She let the 54 seconds breathe, because she knew the air in the room was already working on her behalf. By the time the chair called the next name on the question list, the hearing wasn't about budget lines anymore. It was about whether the sentence just spoken would be treated as a spark or a fuse. Some moments are remembered for what's said, others for the faces that follow. The first crack in composure came from the far right of the dais. Representative Collins, usually a statue during testimony, shifted his weight hard into his chair back, a move that squeaked against the microphone pickup. He masked it with a hand over his mouth, pretending to review a document. 2 seats over, Senator Larrabee wasn't pretending anything. She lowered her glasses down her nose, looked straight across the aisle, and held the gaze of a colleague just long enough to communicate. You heard that too. The chair's grip on the gavel tightened. On the part you strike. The handle, his thumb circling the smooth wood like he was polishing away what had just been said. Down at the witness table, a former agency official was suddenly very interested in rearranging his water glass and papers. He stacked them, then unstacked them, then shifted them 1 inch to the left. Busy hands masking a mind that had just left the room entirely. The press section was a different story. The reporters didn't move much, but their eyes did. They flicked from Crockett to the chair to the ranking member, taking inventory of every micro-expression. Not for the live story, but for the paragraphs that would get filed later, the ones about palpable tension and visible discomfort. Crockett herself was motionless, almost unnaturally so. Her shoulders didn't rise, her pen didn't tap. In politics, restraint is often louder than outrage, and she was letting the room supply all the volume she needed. But the biggest tell came from a staffer in the back row. He'd been typing steadily all morning. Now he stopped, looked at his phone, and then slid it halfway under his folder, shielding the screen from sight. Whatever he'd just read, it wasn't meant for everyone in that chamber. These weren't just reactions. They were fractures, hairline cracks in the facade that no procedural motion could fully sand down. Some gags are for optics. This one was to stop the bleed. The chair didn't slam the gavel. That would have signaled chaos. And chaos is impossible to walk back on live television. Instead, he leaned just slightly toward the committee clerk, his voice dropping low enough that only the microphones in front of them would catch the murmur. It wasn't for the record. It was for the machinery. On the majority side, a senior member began flipping pages in a binder with deliberate noise, as if the sheer sound of paper moving could cover the whispered consultations already starting. An aide in the second row stood, made a show of adjusting his lanyard, then slipped through the side aisle toward the back door. By the time the door clicked shut, 2 more staffers were already craning over their phones. Their thumbs moving like the messages they were sending could keep the day from unraveling. Crockett didn't move. She watched, unblinking, like a chess player who knows her opponent is already down to seconds on the clock. The chair cleared his throat into the mic. The gentle lady's remarks will be taken under advisement, pending review for relevancy under House Rule 17. To most viewers, it sounded procedural. To anyone in politics, it was code. We are freezing this line of questioning before it spreads. But outside the walls, it was already moving. Phones in the press gallery began buzzing. First one, then a ripple through the row. A blog had posted the exact quote. Within another 30 seconds, a national outlet pushed a breaking alert. The push to shut it down had started too late. Sometimes the story escapes before the doors even close. The chair's lips had barely formed the word recess before the energy shifted from confrontation to scramble. Staffers moved first. Some made for the side door, others leaned over to whisper into members' ears. These weren't casual updates. These were coded bursts. Already out. 2 outlets. It's climbing. Phones lit up like a second set of overhead lights. Push notifications, text, screen captures of tweets showing Crockett's 54-second line already stripped, captioned, and reposted with hashtags that would have taken hours to invent if they hadn't been primed for something exactly like this. In the press gallery, reporters abandoned their notepads for keyboards. One called into his editor, no small talk, just, "Run it, I'll send you the cut." On the minority side, a staffer ducked into the hallway, phone pressed to his ear, and began the kind of clipped, fast-paced conversation that's half damage control and half triage. The irony was brutal. The very moment leadership tried to freeze, their attempt to lock it down was now the story. Some members lingered in the room, hovering near the witness table, as if proximity could prove detachment. Others disappeared entirely, off to strategize in private spaces where cameras couldn't catch their faces tightening. Crockett stayed put, not talking, not reacting, just a still image of her at the mic, the one that was now being looped on cable news, eyes level, mouth just slightly open, as if the next sentence might be even sharper than the last. By the time the chair returned to tap the gavel, there was no point in reclaiming the floor. The floor wasn't in the room anymore. It was out there, in headlines, in trending feeds, in inboxes of people who hadn't even known there was a hearing today. The leak hadn't just beaten the recess, it had beaten the institution. Some words dissolve in the air, others stain it. When the committee reconvened, the chair tried to pick up exactly where they had left off, but the sound was different. The voices tighter, the questions perfunctory. Everyone in that room knew the real hearing had ended 30 minutes ago. Procedurally, the record would show a series of unrelated topics handled in order. Politically, the record would be irrelevant. Crockett didn't speak again. She didn't need to. Her 54 seconds were replaying in every head, each mind editing the tone, the meaning, the implications to suit their own narrative. 2 members jotted something in the margins of their folders, not notes for the witness, but for themselves. Names, dates, possible follow-ups. On another day, maybe it would have stayed between them. Today, nothing stayed between anyone. Somewhere in the building, phones were still buzzing with fresh headlines. In certain offices, aides were trying to piece together how much of the claim was known and how much had just detonated in real time. The chair gavelled the hearing to a close. The sound echoed once, then again off the high chamber walls, like it was trying to end something that had already escaped into the bloodstream. There are claims you can walk back. There are claims you can bury under procedure. And then there are claims that, once spoken, will live in the silence that follows. A silence that can last longer than any record. If you were sitting in that chamber, would you have demanded proof or tried to shut it down? Tell us in the comments.